welcome to another episode of Lifestyle Unlimited, where we believe you can live your lifestyle in an unlimited fashion. You know, Peter, today, this is kind of like what's really going on right now, and what I just experienced for myself. And it's really the overall feeling of what sellers think about their properties, right? Their idea that their properties are worth more than what they are, because they're not really understanding that the market is sliding down. They're not seeing that. And I've seen several examples just in the last couple of days.
Well, reality of it is this, and you hear me talk about this, like we're in unprecedented times right now, right? And part of it, and I'll tell you my opinion, and I know you got some specific examples with what's taking place in your personal life, is just happening too quickly. It's happening too quickly, and sellers they're not used to it. I mean, owners are just not used to it. I mean, let's face it, we as investors are kind of being blindsided. I mean, there's deals that we thought were going to make X that we're like happy we're breaking even in right now, and some were actually coming out on the loss side. And we're professionals, like we're in the game, and it's happening in front of us, and we're still like, oh my gosh. I'll give you an example of where it happened a month or so ago in Florida. There was a deal that we were selling for a certain dollar amount. I'm not in like 2 months, we lost 30% of the value. And I'm like, I'm a professional, I guess you would say, right? Yeah. And I still wasn't believing it. I was experiencing it. I was living it. I was seeing this price drop, and I was still like had my eyes closed to it. So I think part of my thing about this whole thing is they're not professionals. They're not in the game. It's hard to believe it. It's like, think about this. We're just looking for a car, right? So let's say we go out there, we buy a car for, let's say, I don't know, $100,000, right? And then next month, for whatever reason, we go try to sell it, and somebody says, well, it's worth $50,000. I wouldn't believe it. But let's say that's like a reality. Not just the fact that we just bought a car and it depreciated somewhat, but let's say it's a total market collapse. Unless you're in the game, I'd be walking into that dealership and I'd be like, no, it's not happening. So I think one of the reasons is just it's unprecedented. It's never happened before, and unless you're like literally in the middle of the game, which let's face it, most owners are, I could totally relate to them not keeping track and in reality, not just believing what's taking place.
Yeah, and you got to look at it too. So we're on the investor side. So we do use appraisers, but I want to explain kind of what an appraiser does. Okay. So like an appraiser is like the grand poobah of knowing how much a property is worth. So much so that banks utilize appraisers to appraise the property prior to the banks giving them somebody a loan. This is like a regular retail deal. So when you have like an FHA or a VA loan, when an appraisal is done, the appraisal actually will stand up for 6 months, meaning that appraisal follows that property, right? So let's say an appraisal comes in low on a house, and a seller says, well, I don't really believe the appraisal. I do not want to come down in price. So we're just not going to do this deal. What they don't understand is that appraisal is set for 6 months on an FHA and a VA loan. You know what I mean? So either the buyer has got to come to table with more money. So generally when you're getting a loan, you're going to have to put some money down, right? So if, let's say, an appraisal comes in, we'll use easy numbers. Let's say you were buying it for $125. Okay, and the appraisal comes in at $100. So not only do you have to have a down payment to get into that $100,000 loan, but if the seller doesn't come down above that, below what they listed it for, then the buyer's going to have to pay that extra $25,000 difference. So what we're seeing right now, and this is a lot in the real estate world, is sellers are not understanding the fact that, like last year, people had the money to pay above and beyond what the appraisal was.
They had to a lot of times.
They had to get the property.
Right.
It's just not like that anymore. So unfortunately, I think because of like a manifestation and pride in thinking, well, I can make this amount of money, or, this is what I think it is. You're not an appraiser. right? You can't change an appraiser's mind. Sure, you can challenge an appraisal, but I'll tell you, challenging appraisals works about, I don't even know the percentage, but it
It's not
doesn't
gonna
work.
No,
It's not going to work. So I think people really should understand that the implications of not taking these deals now, because 6 months from now, they're going to be wishing they took that deal. Don't you see? I mean, do you agree with that?
No, I agree. But again, I think it just comes down to we're in this roller coaster, and we're at that point of the roller coaster where it's going down. Now, it'll ultimately level out, and nobody knows where that leveling out point is, and there'll be some people that are like, they'll level out at where they need it to be. But I just really think it hasn't caught up yet. Now, I'll tell you something interesting. I was just talking to Seth, one of our partners. Here it is, we're saying it hasn't happened yet, but it's starting to happen. He was just telling me an example he was using. This is a deal that we're negotiating in California, right? They initially offered, this is almost a year ago, like I forgot the numbers are, but like almost, let's say $400,000, right? Was no deal, no deal, no deal. He just told me looks like we're getting that same house for $310,000. And guess what? The seller called him.
Yeah.
Like he didn't have to. They were staying in touch. So I think it's starting to hit. I think
it is.
From what I've been hearing and what I've been seeing and kind of the feedback that I've been getting from a lot of people across the country that we're working with, is it seems to be like Q1. People are thinking around Q1, reality is really going to start setting in. Here's the other thing you got to think about. Like think about what happened in your house, right? Is the reality, were the sellers like 100% motivated? Did they need to sell today?
Well, I don't know that they needed to sell today. It was in an estate. And then I'll actually go over this scenario with everybody. The home was in an estate, and it's sitting empty. So, like maybe because they're not in real estate, they don't think they need to sell because they have enough money. The estate has enough money. They are out-of-state owners, but I don't think they realize, number one, the heating unit's out in the house. So you're just going to leave a house sitting empty in Georgia with high humidity. We're going into winter, and the heat don't even work in the house. Like, I don't think they understand how motivated they should be, but it's not my job to tell them that. So here's what happened. So my husband and I, even though we do, investment deals, we buy properties all the time, on this particular deal, I wanted a property that was listed on the MLS. I've got a great real estate agent, or actually broker by the name of Cody Chimbars, that I was able to do this deal with. So I go into the deal, and by the way, this was a conventional loan that I was taking out. So with the original list price, I was able actually to negotiate the deal down $40,000 from the get-go. So I knew they were a little bit motivated, right? Because I thought the house was a little overpriced anyway. So they agreed to that. And then the next thing that I'm going through it. We're almost at the end where we're about to close, and the bank sends the appraiser. Never in my mind would I have thought, I mean, this is me, like I'm in this business. Would I have thought that what I had the house contracted for, that the appraisal would come in $70,000 below what I had it under contract for? So I've got other places to live. I know this is terrible. I mean, it may just be a different scenario. I'm not paying $70,000 more than appraisal. I'd have to come out of pocket that cash. Why would I do that? So then, I went back to him and I'm like, well, go back to them and tell them what the appraisal is. The thing, because it was a conventional loan, it does not stick around for 6 months, right? So it's arbitrary. Well, when they heard it, the buyer's agent said, oh, I don't believe the appraiser. He's just not right. I've been doing this all these years. That's just not right. So he goes back, the buyer's agent goes back to the actual owners of record inside this estate and is like, I just don't believe that this appraisal's right. So I'm going to challenge the appraiser, which is hilarious. It does happen, but very rarely is an appraisal company going to change their mind on what the numbers are. So they provide different comps. The appraiser comes back and says, you know what? Those aren't comparable. I stick with my number. So then it goes down to, I'm like, well, hey, I'm still willing to negotiate, right? I may not be willing to pay, I don't know, $70,000 above appraisal, but I think I'm willing to pay $15,000 over appraisal. You know, I really love the house. It's
Right.
exactly what I was looking for. The love of the house was worth $15,000 for me. Does that
Sure.
make sense? So I go back and we submit the offer back to them. And the text that I get is, well, they said 500 was the lowest they'll go, but I'll submit your offer. Okay. So now I'm giving them 15,000 above the appraisal. They won't budge on price. Literally won't budge on price. So their whole thing is, we're going to wait for another buyer.
Right.
We're going to wait for another buyer when you got a property sitting vacant. The leaves, because we are in North Georgia and there's lots of trees, are this thick in the driveway and in the yard. Unless they get somebody to come,
Right.
I don't understand why they would do that. You know, it's funny thing is I told, and this is a little snarky, but I told my husband, or actually he told me, he goes, you know what? We'll just wait 6 months and buy it for $100,000 less than what we offered them now, because that's where they're going to be sitting. So I think my point is, and you know, this is my point of view, but my point is that you can't let pride get in the way right now. I think if you're selling a property, you should be very considerate of all offers. I'm not talking about taking below what it's worth, but if you've got a good offer on the table, somebody that's willing to take a loan now with the interest rates as high as they are, and the appraisal comes in at that, I'd take the deal. I'd take the deal. I wouldn't like sit there and say, oh, well, another buyer's going to bring me this. They're not. They're not. People are not paying 7-8% interest rates right now and paying above appraisals. That's what's changed. So, you know, if anything I could tell someone when they're listening to this is, this ain't 6 months or a year ago, is it? Like you said, because that deal you were doing.
Right.
I mean, you're
No
talking
question.
a matter of 2 months it changed by 40 grand.
Right.
2 months.
No question. You know, we work off, this is kind of how I'm interpreting the market right now with the sellers not being realistic. You know, let's face it, we're in a business of motivated sellers. You know, almost all the deals we do, there's some kind of motivation involved, right? But now we have this whole new thing that was not involved 4, 5, 6 months ago, and that's called a reality check. I mean, if you think about it, everything we're talking about is just a reality check. And it really goes back to, I think, where I started from. It's above people's heads. I hate to say it, but they're not subject matter experts. They're not keeping track of what's taking place. So really, the motivation may be there. It may not be there. Like in your case, you know, these people, you're right. Maybe they don't understand what's going on, but it sounds like they're not broke either, so they'll probably be able to weather the storm.
And they don't live in Georgia.
And they don't live in Georgia, so when you put all those factors together, you know, they're not like dead broke, need to sell. But what has not happened to them is a reality check yet. And that's really what we as investors are really to a certain degree waiting for to happen. But I will tell you this, the reality is this reality check is happening. It is happening more and more. It's still not where I thought it should be. But again, I can explain that away because it's happening so quickly. But I really think going into 2023, all of these deals, you know, not all of them, but a huge portion of these deals, like your deal that didn't get done, this other deals that we thought were going to be able to get the seller.
Well, like that one you did. You could have been prideful.
Well, that's right. But since I'm in a game and I see it, I'm
well,
like,
you knew better. You're like, I'm taking the good now.
well, it's better to cut the losses. But I do think the reality is going to sink in. And here's how it's going to sink in. Number one, and I'm sure you're seeing it too, all you got to do is you got to get on the internet and you're seeing it. Market collapse, market collapse, market collapse. So number one, the sellers, the owners are being hit with it more and more and more from news media. Number two, all it takes is for a seller to have one or two experience that your seller had. Because guess what? Let's say they have it under contract tomorrow, right? And that appraisal comes in.
It's going to come in just like the one I just did.
So number one, they're going to get hit more and more reality of what's really taking place from the media, from the internet outlets and all this. Number two, they're going to start experiencing their own reality when they're like, no, I don't want to deal with you. All of a sudden, somebody else comes in and they give them the exact same numbers. So they're going to deal with more reality checks. So I think the combination of just a lot of news heading their way, a lot of information heading their way, their own personal experience, I do feel like we're in a cusp of a lot of these deals that should be deals right now are going to become deals. So reality is going to hit. It's just a matter of time. If you're an investor or if you're an investor that's looking to get into the game, I'm telling you, this is the time to do it.
Absolutely.